Right, councillors, staff, there are no members of the public. We have councillors Marsh and Daly by Zoom, just reminding you all that we need to use our little red buttons when we want to talk so that they can hear us. Welcome to this council meeting C22-1, and I will call on Chris to open with a karakia, please.
Kei noi tātou, tūtaua mai runga, tūtaua mai raro, tūtaua mai roto, tūtaua mai waho, kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, kei waingani a tātou e hui nei tēnei rangi, a haungi e hui e tāhi. Your Worship, I've given over to the governance team a translation of the karakia this morning, just for noting in the minutes. Kia ora.
Thank you very much, and thanks for that, Chris. We have no apologies. We have no request for a public forum. So we go to any declarations of interest. There appears to be none. We move to the council proper now, page 8, which is the performance and monitoring for receipt of those minutes. Move it a seconder, please. Councillor Thwaites, Councillor Granger, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. We now go to page 22, which is the minutes of the Policy Committee. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder, please, from the Councillor Soul? I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. I declare that carried. We now move to page 29, which is the minutes of the council meeting that we had just before Christmas. Can move in a seconder for that being a true and correct record, please. Councillor Murray Benj.
No, sir, I wish to make some comment on that. The minutes are incorrect. Where you form a division, call a division, it's wrong to just give the numbers. The names of those who voted for and voted against should be recorded. I think it's 90 point something on our standing orders, but that should be corrected.
So you're quite a move with that amendment. That I'm sorry if I did not hear the call for a division, but so you want to amend.
The division was called, and yes, the name should be always listed under the numbers.
I understand what you're saying, but what's the resolution point that you're talking about? The very first one, the notice of motion.
It's the one with
so you want added to there that a division was called for, and we will put the names in correctly.
Yes, there is another issue though, sir, and that is one of your independence. You didn't declare that you had a conflict of interest, and that should have been declared at the time. And if that was the case, you would have not voted, and Murray Granger's motion would have become a resolution, and it's linked into the code of conduct, and really is something whereby we reflect what our communities are wanting, and they were telling us in a public forum and in the 400 notices that came through, and then another 100, that they didn't want a bar of the three waters. And it really is important that it was reflected in the leadership around this table. So I think, sir, it's wrong that you actually even participated in that process.
Thank you for your opinion, but getting back to the amendment, do you want all of that in there, or just that the division was called for and these are the people on either side of it?
That's true, but this is the second point, sir.
Well, we're actually approving the minutes.
And I'm saying to you, the minutes are incorrect in that you should not have participated.
Well, that's your opinion. I have a different one, so let's leave that there and stick to the reality.
I think
so. Do we have a seconder for that, please?
Oh, I'll second.
Thank you. Councillor Murray Benj, seconded by Councillor Henry, and you've got the wording. Could you read back the wording, please?
Yes, I do. I can. That the following amendment be made to the recommendation for item number 8.1, notice of motion, Councillor Granger, Three Waters proposal to reflect a division being called. The motion was put, a division was called and recorded as follows. In favour, Councillors Granger, Henry, Marsh, Murray Benj, Soul and Thwaites. Against, Councillor Mayor Webber, Councillor Scrimger, Daly, Dean, Denyer and Gray. This was an equal division. The chairperson then exercised his casting vote and voted against the motion. The motion was declared lost on the casting vote.
So is there any discussion on that?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Certainly.
Yeah, I'm in with Margaret. Conflict of interest. You were on that committee, and that is something that we always say, that there's conflict of interest before we start. And I say that being put on that committee, you had a conflict of interest, and you should have asked the chairman or the deputy chairman to actually take the meeting.
So now we have a motion. Are you speaking for or against the motion? You're going to vote for the motion or against the motion?
What motion are you talking
Well,
about?
this is the amendment to the receipt of the minutes.
I'm talking that I'm in favour of what was Margaret just put.
Right, thank you. So anybody else want to speak for or against it? If not,
I'm just a bit confused about what's happening here.
well, we're approving the minutes of the last meeting as a true and correct record.
Mm.
So in the minutes, it did not include the division. So Margaret's asked that the division be noted in the minutes, which
Yeah,
we have changed. So we're approving the minutes now of the last meeting as a true and correct record.
Mm.
We're not relitigating the meeting.
okay. So if there is a discussion about that, that can't be had, or when can it?
We can
be
have
had?
that in the councillor executive forum if you want to.
Oh, okay.
Mm. So getting back to the motion, are there any speakers for or against? If not, I'll put it, let all those in favour please say aye. Against, no.
Aye.
Carried. We now move to page 44, which is the minutes of the policy committee held on the 8th of February. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Sol. I'll put that. All those in favour please say aye. Against, no. I declare that carried. We now go to page 48, which is the land lease for the Pukahina Ratepayers Association. Is there anything, did any have questions of staff?
I have a question.
Right.
I take it that this is based on the premise that the Ratepayers Association acting as hall committee will get sign off approval for the use of the hall. Because it almost seemed, why I asked that is it was almost like a cart before the horse in one sense, in that we're approving the lease when we're still waiting for confirmation of the hall's ability to operate.
Mr. Ellis, do you want to comment on that, please?
Yes, so in terms of the process, it's probably a little bit back to front, but it requires the lease in place and then the transfer of the building ownership to the Ratepayers Association and confirmation that the hall can continue to operate.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? If no, do I have a move and a second? 1, 2 and 3 without 4? Right, thank you. And the seconder, please. Councillor Dean. I'll put that recommendations 1, 2 and 3 on page 48. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. I declare that carried. No, sorry. Right. 1, 2, 3, and that'll become 4 now.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Page 58, which is the stormwater easement over Makaroa South East Coast Main. Any questions of staff? Councillor Henry?
Yeah, I had quite a good look at where this was. Oh, sorry, this is the Mangawai, the development that's looking out over Mangawai Bay. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Coming off Linley Park Drive, I think it is. Is that right?
No. Gary, you might want to explain.
It's the Goldstone development. So the Harbour Ridge.
Oh,
It's further out.
Yeah. Okay, so I realise that water is going into the harbour, but we did hear with Mr. Mattelli, Pete Phillip, that the development down there was going to be the lungs, and now I see it's referred to as the kidneys, that would actually take the water, and we wouldn't be putting it into the harbour. So I'm presuming that this is going in because of the development that's down there. Am I right or wrong?
Yes, so if you look at the plan on page 52, so the what you've got is you've got the development with the roading. You then have a stormwater pond. So the stormwater pond has been vested in council. And then from the stormwater pond, which does treatment and holding and treatment, the discharge has to go across an esplanade into the harbour. And this is about approving I guess the legal status of that, transferring the water across the esplanade reserve. We have this in a number of cases.
I understand all of that, but my concern is that we have the rhetoric around that water is going to be absorbed and filtered through.
It's filtered through the stormwater pond. So
So it is. Okay.
yeah, so it absolutely goes through the stormwater pond. So the works that are there, the stormwater pond is fully consented and meets the required standards.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Oh, quick. No, 4. Oh, sorry, yep.
Just a quick clarification, Gary, if I may. On page 62, the map shows lot 201 DP 519381, but elsewhere in the resolution it says lot 204 DP 519381. Can you just confirm that the resolution is the right property, please?
Sorry, based on the aerial, it shows us as lot 201, DP 519381.
But the survey and the resolution say lot 204.
Yeah, sometimes there's a gap between the survey plan and the actual plans. They do change numbers at times. But we can probably, Your Worship, I'll get that checked and we can just make sure it's got the right reference in the resolution. But I can't see why the resolution would be incorrect.
Thank you.
Happy to second the motion.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on that? If not, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. Accepting that Mr. Ellis will make sure the correct details are in recommendation 3. We now move to page 64, which is the right to convey electricity through the local purpose reserve at Waihi Beach. Are there any questions of staff on that? Councillor Henry?
Peter kindly attended the Broadens Block meeting, and there was, do you know about, there's a bit of a conflict with, has that already been sorted with another person, Trees for Survival, that was money coming in from Powerco, and do you know about that, Gary?
I'm not aware of that. I'm aware that the location of the cable has been agreed.
Yeah. Oh, no, it was about the contribution.
No, this is not to do with the contribution. This is to do with giving them the easement across the property.
So typically for an easement like this with Powerco, we would charge them an easement fee. In this case, the agreement is that they'll make a contribution to the restoration of the land. I'm not aware if the quantum of that contribution has been agreed yet or not, but we would expect it to be based on what we would have normally charged for the easement in the first place. And we would expect them to pay the easement costs of doing the legalisation of it.
So I think that we talk about the easement now, not some of the subsequent agreements. So do I have a mover and a seconder there, please? Denia and Henry, the people there. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no, carried. We now move to page 69, which is the renaming of the Broadlands block. Are there any questions of staff there? Is it the process? A question or?
No question.
Right, it's been moved. Councillor Henry, do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Denia. There's no conversation, discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. We now move to page 75, which is my report to the council. The first thing there are Three Waters, which I'm sure you're all aware of. That group is about to reach the end of its conclusion. The big issues, and it's more in reference to the meeting we're going to have later, or the discussion we're going to have later on, and the meeting on Monday, is the community voice and the role of the future development strategy that has to be done by each council. We have been able to get that recommended, and I think there's general acceptance across the thing that the future development strategy, which is consulted on at the council level by the council, will be the fundamental document. The GPS across the top, which is the government policy statement, will set the rules. And in real simple terms, these new organisations, the only fundamental role they play is to make sure that all of the assets that are in place in the Three Waters space are compliant with Taumata Arawai standards and the resource consent conditions. So what they play in terms of existing assets is pretty minimal. The other area which Councillor Thwaite raised when we were going through the issues was around growth councils. And it's been recognised that growth councils, the funding of the assets for growth will be done, and Western Bay is one that we've talked about, is the use of financial contributions. So the developers will fund any new assets for growth. But as Councillor Thwaites made the point, and some of us have laboured really, the difficulty between, or what we recognise there is a major problem in New Zealand with councils. Everybody agrees that, and everybody agrees we've got to get to the new standards, and Taumata Arawai has to be more aggressive at compliance. The organisations that are available to do the maintenance of the existing, and we're in that space, we've all contracted it out. And the people that build the new facilities are the same organisations. So the big issue nationwide is that who sets those priorities? Now, what I have recommended and has got a bit of traction is the process that is used at Smart Growth, which is how you identify. The other issue that we've said is the Crown needs to provide a significant guarantee, and we've used the road transport issue where you can say it has to happen, but if you're not going to front with the money, then it's a bit of a, what the hell are we doing this for? So in the ownership structure, the Crown has agreed to become a guarantor. At this stage, I don't think the quantum, or if you talk, we've had Standard & Poor's and LGFA and all the funding people say these organisations will be able to get the funding. But what we've said, some of us, is if the funding's not there and the Crown is committed to these reforms, they are going to have to be the backstop. We have two more meetings. Well, it was supposed to be two more meetings, one tomorrow and one the following Friday, but the council's representatives, we were put there as independents, are meeting tonight to work our way through. We still have not arrived at a solution for the ownership issue. So that's pretty much an update on one where we're at the Three Waters. But the fundamental thing that we've said is at these organisation levels, the first item on the agenda should be like ours, apologies, declarations of interest. The real important thing is, are all of the assets compliant? Yes or no? If it's yes, that's the end of the meeting. If it's no, what is the process we're going to do? And if you lift it at that level, which is where some of us keep on trying to take them back, it's about compliance. So that's about the upright. So if there's any questions, Councillor Granger.
Thank you. If Te Mata Arawai are the people setting the standards and policing them, and if councils are the ones who are raising the funds through FinCos for the assets, and if the, as you say, the downers and those sort of people who actually do the work all remain in place, what on earth is the point of these water entities? What are they going to do? Councils are still going to do their jobs. The water contractors are still going to do their job. The policing is still going to come from someone else. Have they done themselves out of a job?
I think it's been made very clear by many of the councils, and some of our near neighbours are one of them. Wakatani has 6 resource consents that they expire on the 30th of October 2026. And if they were a similar council to ourselves, that's 4 years away. They should by now have made a decision on who's going to build the new facilities, what's the cost of them, how they're going to fund it, and it should have gone through their long-term plan. It is not in their long-term plan. That's one example. You have several others around New Zealand. It is recognised by the councils they cannot fund that 120 to 160 billion over the next 10 or 15 years. And it's a lot of the small councils. Some of the other issues are the Auckland, Tauranga and Hamilton. I'm not too sure Tauranga so much, but Auckland and Hamilton and Christchurch are starting to make noises, is the cross-subsidisation. That's the only way it's going to happen. That there's going to be cross-subsidisation for the little councils. And that's going to come from the big metros. The other proposal that came in was that government just give the councils that 120 or 160 billion dollars in one shape or form, and we'll get on with it and do it. This council has been opposed to that since day one, because if the government gives those poor performers funding so that taxpayers pay for them to come up to the standard, Western Bay and a few other councils, about 6 or 7, will always be at a disadvantage because our ratepayers paid us to get there. And we've always said, if government's going to step in and just do, and our honourable colleague here is aware, in the Tamaki Regeneration Project, central government stepped in and has given Auckland City already a bucket load of money for Three Waters. They gave $1 billion to Auckland. Auckland got $500 million. Tauranga got $250 million, and Waikato got $250 million for their Three Waters infrastructure. When we applied to the HIF fund, we were told, because you future-proofed yourself, well done, and we think you've done well, but we are not retrospectively funding anybody. So there's been a bucket load of money given out by council already, by government already, which we have been disadvantaged at. And I was always, we've had that in early years, that Western Bay wants to make sure that nobody gets away with that. So, that's some of the background to it. Margaret Murray-Bench, then Anne, and then Grant Daly.
Could I ask, so what's happening to the 4 entities that are being suggested for the ownership?
They're still the same. They're still the same 4 entities.
So we come under the entity 4?
Entity B.
Entity B.
Yeah, which is
right.
part of Taranaki, Waikato, and ourselves, and that's basically to get Hamilton City and Tauranga City as the big metros in.
You mentioned the big metros, but we all know that Wellington's in an absolute mess. Who's subsidising them?
That's the cold hard light today. the ratepayers are going to have to pay the bill.
So one of the things that's always bugged me is we've got a truckload of money for Makatu. It was either 10 or $12 million to put sewage into that area because it was a low decile area and we couldn't afford to do it. And we got it from internal affairs and it worked. We were able to afford it and the people were delighted. Well, they grumbled, but we've got there. And so you talk about the Crown. Is the Crown internal affairs or is the Crown like the Transport Board so they pay politics with us?
The upshot of it is there is no Crown funding of it. If Crown stepped in to bring everybody up to current standard by even 2026, there's a $160 billion problem. And the ratepayers are going to have to pay that in one shape or form. I think the big thing that most people have recognised now, this transition will most probably take 15 to 20 years to achieve. It's not going to happen overnight because we haven't got the resources.
But where does the ownership lie?
The ownership will lie in the new entities.
We were told from the beginning the ratepayers would still be the owners.
They own the entity.
But they lose.
No. There's collective. I'll use Councillor Scrimgeour. He was a shareholder in a dairy company in the Bay of Plenty. That dairy company merged with some others. With New Zealand Dairy Group, and he still retained the shareholding. The value of his shareholding is about the same. It was a far bigger organisation and had a lot more shareholders. So that's one of the issues that we're still having to work our way through. And I must admit, I'm not too sure, and we're in public space here now, so it doesn't bother me. There are many bureaucrats in Wellington who have not been through mergers and acquisitions and don't understand how you can have different classes of shares which attract different things. And what we've been saying, it's a three-party joint venture. The councils are bringing their assets, many of them broken and non-compliant, but that's what they bring. Maori bring Te Mana Otuwai via the legislation, and Crown bring the backstop. They're the three parties. Now, how you cobble those together in terms of the rights and interests of the different parties is just some technical stuff we have to work our way through. But people like James Denyer and myself that have been in mergers and acquisitions, to me, it's relatively easy to recognise the value of those assets. So if we've got, I don't know, Gary, help me, what's the value of our three waters? Yeah. If we have, so we've got that now, well, that will transfer into the entity and our shareholding on that entity will be about whatever that value is, net of debt. But the total entity will be a hell of a lot bigger than Western Bay on its own.
It's a question to our staff. We have a structure here and our staff are well employed and we have a standard that we have met. And if with this new entity and all the layers of decision making to go up that body to determine who gets what and when, you've got one thing with you've got Tuatu, whatever, giving guidance, but there will be a structure that actually determines who gets what, presumably.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we protect our staff and the local government structure that we have created? Take away our water, our wastewater and our stormwater, although how you can do that when you're doing developments, I wouldn't know. What does that leave? How does that leave local government?
Well, in my opinion, nothing changes. We still have to do a future development strategy, which is what we do. And right now, when we decide we're going to do Makatu, we don't send our own staff out with a shovel and a bulldozer and a whole lot of pipes and say, fix it. We contract it out to somebody. The maintenance of it, we contract out. The other thing I just remind you all, we have a line item in our long-term plan about digitisation of $10 million. We ask staff, we want to become state-of-the-art. Staff have actually got on with that. Now, the asset management plan, and Gary Ellis, you might have to help me here. The asset management plan we went and looked at, we could have bought a new one. Staff got together with Tauranga City And we are now doing or using water care, all the back office work. Staff thought that was the best interest. And that's what this is talking about. If you remember back 6 years ago, we were part of a group, we were part of the Bay of Plenty that spent $750,000 trying to improve just the Bay of Plenty. And one of the recommendations that came from that is a common back office supply. This is no different. It's the same sort of thing, in my opinion.
I remain very sceptical about it. You might give the example of Fonterra and private businesses merging, but my view is, and I'm certainly in favour of combining with Tauranga for maintenance programs. We've done that with our roading assets and it's worked really well. But to create anything that's bigger than that, you then end up with big bureaucracies where nobody wins, certainly not the little individual ratepayer. They'll have no control whatsoever.
Right, thanks. And Henry, your comment or question?
Yeah, with respect to you, Mr. Mayor, I don't see what you described to be any different to what the model of Orowai, whatever it is. I should have that in my head, shouldn't I? Can someone help me?
Taumata Orowai.
Yeah. In that, the thing, what was missing was the regulatory authority is actually making, coming alongside the councils that weren't doing what they're supposed to be doing and getting them to do it. So that's what I see that model to do. And what you've explained is the way, the mechanism there is to enable the smaller councils to amalgamate or to draw down funds, central government, which is paid back through their rates over generational ratepayers. And so I don't see that to be what you explained, and forgive me if I haven't picked up all what you said. That's what I see that was. So they would then use the central government to help them, all that would happen. And as you say, all the contractors and everything else remains the same. And I am very nervous about moving into a centralised position with the water. Our water is managed very well by our staff. When we move to a centralised pace, and you mentioned it, Waka Kotahi, telling us here they have no money because of COVID. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't want to get into a situation where they say, I'm sorry, we've got no money, we can't come out and do your water. I mean, obviously they'll do the emergencies, but not the things that we're able to do as a body of council and staff and contractors that just focusing on our rohi. So, if it changes,
Look,
I cannot see, this is the last point, I cannot see that the big entity is going to manage our water as efficiently as it is being managed now by our staff and our contractors. And I am very, very nervous about it.
I come back to the fundamental issue is if everybody had to be compliant in a very short space of time, it cannot happen. There has to be a totally different way of getting the funding, and that's why we've said we haven't signed off on this yet. We haven't got government's agreement. Government have to be, if they want to drive this the way they're driving it, they have to be prepared to step in behind and say if that money's not available, then they will provide it. We keep on saying the NZTA, if they're going to use the NZTA model, we're not going there. So we've made that point.
Could you just explain how you would see that if you made that agreement, if they made that agreement, how we could hold that to them? When they say to us, no, we can't fix your roads, we've got no money.
That's what we're legislating for.
Legislation.
That's a lot of it's in legislation. We've got a meeting, as I said, tomorrow and the following week on this very point. That's the sticking point so far. Grant Daly, you've got a question?
Yeah, you answered a few with your response to Margaret, but I just want to know, will the issue of asset ownership be resolved before your final working group report is concluded? And how are the other working groups progressing, rural water supplies and the other one? Are they due for completion as well?
My understanding, they're progressing on the same sort of thing. We have got the right to have a report that is either unanimous, majority provided, majority supported, or no agreement at all. And we haven't got a report that we can send off where it's unanimous at all at this stage.
And the asset ownership issue, is that going to be is that something that you need to resolve?
As I've just been saying, that is the thing we've got to sort out. The ownership of the assets has not been resolved as yet, in our opinion.
Okay. Thank you.
Alan?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just keep looking at this, and basically the fundamentals to it are Taumata Atawai sets these regulations now, sounds quite good. Okay, we've got to start meeting those standards. But to me, I still haven't come to grasp with, we sit here not happy.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, I will repeat, basically, I can see that we have Taumata Atawai and setting the standards, etc., and that's a good place to start. But I can't see now how, with councils that cannot fund the improvements and and achieve the required standards now, can't carry that debt on their ledgers, etc. I can't see how a change to this format, where the money still comes from wherever, there's virtually to me no difference. If we don't want to subsidise all these other guys and be part of a bigger group paying for it, helping pay for it, then I cannot see how these other councils with major problems, bigger ones than maybe what we've got coming up the lift, can expect to pay it. It doesn't alter the fact they're still going to have to pay it. So to me, it's an exercise in running around in futility.
Thanks that I hear. Just remember, this is got to go through a select committee process. Once the next iteration comes out of government, it'll have to go through a select committee process, at which stage it is recognised every council will put a submission into that. So it's got to go through the select committee process because there's some significant changes. So all of this, what we're talking about is some governance issues. And as Grant said, the rural water thing has to be resolved. So this is going to take another year, I would say, to go through the process. But every council will be putting, well, I assume every council will be putting a submission into the select committee.
Minister Mahuta said long before she made the mandated decision that she would go out to consultation. So is there any talk about going out to consultation on the decision that could be made?
That'll go through a select committee process, which is you'll
as
have
the
to,
public? Is that
yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering.
Anybody could submit to a government legislation that's going through.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Murray-Benj.
The unfortunate thing about a select committee at the moment is that the government has got such a huge majority, it can just stack it and push it through. And we've seen examples of that already. But hand on heart, Mr. Mayor, you are the leader of a local authority that's a good one. You have the assets that are really well funded, and we plan for the future and we do it as we should. nobody can criticize, you can criticize us as much as you like, but in reality, on the three waters, we have done what is right. We know that our near neighbours aren't so efficient, and heaven knows what they're going to do with sewerage when we come to that. But it's they're not as efficient, and all I know is that Fonterra got too big, and the bigger you make a body, the less influence the individual has on it. We'd be terribly restricted with what we can do, queuing up to get funds from this body or approval to tax our ratepayers to do the work that we would normally do. So hand on heart, sir, knowing that you run a good organisation, can you really say that this big bungling machine is going to be better?
Hand on heart, yes, I can. But remember, I'm put there as an individual. And contrary to what a lot of some of the public, and it's a very narrow group of the public, view, and I'll go back to your comment about 400 of those people that came in. I think there was less than 100 or less than 200 of them were actually residents. That a lot of them was a letter they sent to all councils. So the same letter went to about 20 councils throughout New Zealand. So get the statistics right. I believe that what Western Bay has done is exemplary. But what really concerns me and Gillian and myself and Miriam, when we went down to see the HIF people, were bitterly disappointed at government bailing out the likes of Auckland, Hamilton and Tauranga, to billions of dollars, and they didn't look after us. And the position I've taken in all the way through, I find that abhorrent. If central government's going to bail out the poor performers, and so the taxpayers will wear that bill, Western Bay's rates will always going forward be significantly higher than anybody else's. To me, the only way is there is cross-subsidisation, and trust me, we will be on the receiving end. We're not on the, we'll be on the midpoint because we're only about 55,000. You've got New Plymouth and a lot of other places there bigger than us. So to me, we've just got to go through it. But I say, the final opportunity will be the select committee.
Well, that, sir, fills me with horror, and I just hope that it isn't in the next year.
Well, with all due respect, Margaret, you've been around central and local government politics a lot longer than most of us around here. Governments come and go, and some of them had majorities and some of them don't have majorities. We live in a democracy.
We did.
We still do. So that's all I have. I think that's about the end of Three Waters. The only thing on smart growth is to say that the Eastern Town is now in the process of going forward, and it's in a very early stage. That's the possibility of building 30,000. Minister Woods from Transport was in town on Tuesday. He was hoping to be picked up by NZTA staff and from his hotel where it was in the city, out to Bayfair in a car. Then they're going to drive in through the city out to Tauriko, and then from Tauriko across to Amakara, and then back into town for a meeting which was going to start at 9 o'clock. And as I suggested to them, if he thought he was going to do that in an hour and a half, he was dreaming. We offered, I must admit it was off the cuff from myself, to put him up in a helicopter to fly around, because he would achieve far more in a short space of time. He declined that offer, but fortunately he drove from Tauranga to Amakara on Tuesday morning. Unfortunately, because of COVID, the traffic was pretty light. But they drove down Amakara Road to where the roundabout in Jace is about to go there, and saw all the housing development that was going on. He then drove back to what we call the gravel pit, and they parked the car in there, and he made the point to some that normally we can build around about $14 or $15 million. why does this one look closer to 50 million? And the NZTA staff said, well, if you look at that little mountain on the left-hand side there, and if you look at the gully on the right-hand side there, that all has to be flattened out before we can get to a flat point. So he understood. He then went to a meeting with what's called the Urban Task Force, which is pretty much property developers. The property developers who are in Mokoroa were quite vocal that, you know, you come in here and you say this and you say that, and we just want to get on with it. He acknowledged that, yes, they were ready to go. He also mentioned that he was meeting with myself, and Gary Ellis and I met with him at 5:45. I also was part of a Regional Transport Committee meeting. He knows exactly where we stand, what our issues are, and I think Gary reasonably comfortable with his position. No guarantees, but he does assure us his full support for our application is in there. So that's where we got to with smart growth. Rest assured, we don't give up. He made the point that he thinks perseverance is one of my strengths. He said it politely. We met also with Grant Robertson yesterday, and we talked to him, and he made the point, yes, I know the projects you're talking about. So we've just got to hope that in, I don't know, Gary, April, May sometime, we hear on the IAF application. April, yeah. Councillor Murray.
I have no faith in Mr. Woods at all, and I didn't go to priority 1 because of that. Could you tell us then why, in fact, the loop road to Mokoroa was taken off the 10-year plan, and to get it back on, we have to go through 2 layers of regional transport planning committees again, and you get a change of government or change of minister, and Mr. Twyford at least had a brain, but this fellow has made decisions that really have counteracted so badly against us. It's just not fair. So he was saying he was agreeing with you. So what process did he suggest, sir, that would speed up the decision to actually get us back where we need to be with our planning and our forward planning for the people of Mokoroa, and even Kerikeri should be 4-laned all the way to town. So it's just defies logic, really.
With all due respect, we've traversed this many times before. If you look at the cost to bring 3 waters up to standard, the cost to bring roads up to standard, the cost to bring schools up to standard, hospitals up to standard, we're in the queue with everybody else.
Right, so but we're not in some of the queues, like there are differences. And I'm just asking, you said last time it would be 3 years into the Regional Transport Planning Committee to actually get it back into the system. Why?
No, sorry, I did not say that. That was the original, and there is an amendment gone through, Gary, to bring it back into, so there's been an amendment to the National Land Transport Plan from the Regional Council to bring it back in. So it's back in the process.
I can't understand why it went off.
Well, neither can I, but it did. And everybody's apologised to me, and they feel nicely. But and Gary wasn't there. When I was in the Regional Transport Committee meeting with most of the other mayors, and they went around the table on what was going on. When it came to my turn to speak, I said to him, the Regional Land Transport Committee and Regional Land Transport Planning has been an abject failure in my 12 years. The amount of, my words were, I'm pretty sure, I'll get this right. If you look at the amount of executive and governance time that's gone into putting these plans together year after year after year after year, NZTA turn up and say, we abstain from voting because I can't commit the funding. Absolutely. I said, it's just a waste of time. Why do you waste our time? Come and tell us at the front end there's no money. Just absolutely. So again, he did not misunderstand me. Thanks. Councillor Henry and then Councillor.
Just a quick thing, even though I'll be excited about the 4-lane highway to Kalikali, we will never have one. We have roundabouts that are going and we have cheese cutters going down the middle of the road. We have all, it will never happen. But thank you for supporting our cause, mate.
Thanks, Grant Daly.
Yeah, Gary, sorry, you sort of glossed over the Eastern Town thing a bit, but can you just give a bit more detail about how that has been green lighted?
Well, it comes back to one of the earlier things we were saying on Three Waters. If you, those of you who have been following Smart Growth, and all the papers have been available to you, there is a template being organised now because for 50 or 20 years since Smart Growth began, there's been this battle between Tauranga City and Western Bay on where should stuff go. And it's been so emotive. But at the last meeting, there was a template prepared, and you've all got the copies of them there, which is a process going through. When they looked at all the priority development areas and put them through the template, the Eastern Town had more chance of flying than a lot of the others in the short term. So that's why we have been given approval to do a lot of the very initial work, working about where to and that sort of thing, what's involved. But the critical thing is about master planning and how we guarantee affordable houses and all that sort of stuff. So it was just a process of taking an objective view of a whole lot of factors. The templates are available if you want to read them. I had hoped all councillors would have read it to understand that's how the Eastern Town has got out of the blocks.
Thank you.
And they had a 4-lane highway ready there.
Absolutely. And that's the logic thing. Central government put 600 million in a road, a 4-lane highway, because this was supposed to happen. Remember, Tauranga City to Tumu-Waraki was supposed to kick off the same time Amakara did. And that's the point we made, Gary and I made to Minister Woods when we showed him the houses that we saw physically, the houses that have been built, the houses we hope to build in Structure Plan 3. And the general consensus is other parts may be 10 to 15 years away. Western Bay is ready to build a house right now. Sorry, Margaret?
And so that's the great dilemma. You've got developers anxious to get on with Pangaroa, Okahina, Makatu, and here we, instead of us getting our district scheme up to scratch and moving it more quickly, we're digressing ourselves and creating another town. And that's one of the great advantages. We all voted for tolling of the Eastern Link, which would open up that far side of our district. And I just think it should have more support than what it's got at the moment.
Well, sorry, Margaret, that's what I've just been talking about. The Tauranga Eastern Link from the end of the roundabout through to Rangiuru is to develop that whole area. That's what the Eastern Town's about. So it's up on, it's, you know, Gary, you were there, you might want to comment. It's now got a pretty high priority.
Yes, it does, and perhaps, Your Worship, we might discuss it a little bit later in confidential.
Yes, thank you. Right, so that's the last item I've got is just a letter back on the forestry work that was done in response to a letter about, you know, if all this carbon emissions thing and people are converting good agricultural land to trees, it is a major problem. So that is now up in front. You've seen the green paper. That's going to government now, and I understand that's on hold as well. Also,
I'd just like to comment about that green paper. I was very disappointed at the way it dismisses the potential of native species forestry. It only looks at native species as a carbon sequestering unit rather than a production possibility. And I think there's been enough research done now, especially in Northland with the Northern Totara group up there, to prove that native species forestry is very viable in this country and should be being pursued rather than just dismissed, as this paper says.
thank you. Councillor Daniel.
Well, I would agree with Mark, but I'd also say that one of the points that I noticed most in that paper was that carbon farming provide almost all the profit for these forests. Harvesting is the cherry on top. It's almost irrelevant actually. And I would wonder what the economics are in comparison for natives, but broadly I agree with you, Mark. Thank you.
That's the problem, and that's what's driving it. The carbon price is what's driving people planting trees full stop. What they do either or is, as you say, the cherry on the top. Yeah. Right, well, with that, I'll move receipt of my report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Alan Salt. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. Yeah.
Just an observation. I think that's probably the longest report I've seen you give. And that's definitely a sign of the times, and we're going to be having more of them like that as we go forward. There's so much that's coming through that you're, at central government level.
I think I do give pretty comprehensive, I forward on any significant information that you people get. I am pretty careful at what I do in the public. Like I fringed in the Three Waters, I'm not supposed to say anything about that on the committee, but that's by the by. I think it's better, as Gary said, a lot of the things that we need to discuss, they need to be done in confidential. No, I understand that, but it's just the nature of the times we're in at the moment. I think there's a lot on the go. So I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, no. I declare that carried, and suggest we break now for morning tea. And if we can be back, Grant and Kevin, at 10:40, that would do fine. Thanks.